Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Link Senior Activity Strong Executive Edition webinar. My name is Megan McMahon, and I am the Director of Strategic Development here at Link Senior. For today's webinar event, we are providing one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, NCTRC, and NZSRDT CEU credit. To be eligible for those CEU credits today, you do need to remain on the webinar for the full hour. At the end of today's webinar, I will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box. And I will also send that link to you by email. So please be sure to check your spam folder in case it lands there this afternoon. This survey that I send must be completed by midnight Eastern time on Thursday this week. If you have any questions at all, please email us at webinars@linksenior.com. CEU certificates will be issued by email by the end of the day on Friday, October 14th. So today's webinar is about how empathetic management improves resident engagement, and we are very happy to have Dave Keaton as our featured speaker today. I am proud to be the co-producer of the Activity Strong virtual event series alongside Charles D. Villemorn, who is the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. And as many of you know, our team believes in a world where people of all ages are respected and valued. And that is why we started our Old People Are Cool initiative in 2017. And we believe that activity and life enrichment professionals are incredible and that you are our industry's unsung heroes, which is why we created the Activity Strong initiative 2 years ago to acknowledge, educate, and empower each of you. We're just really excited to be working with so many forward-thinking communities across the United States and Canada, and look forward to welcoming more communities on board with us in the weeks and months ahead. We are enhancing life in senior living communities by building simple and evidence-based solutions to bring person-centered care experiences to older adults and their care partners. Our technology really focuses on engagement, connection, and celebration of individuality. In 2018, we did partner with the Responsive Group in Toronto and Western Oregon University to research our impact on resident engagement with funding from the Center for Aging and Brain Health Innovation. And the results from that study showed that our technology increased cognitive functioning and social engagement for residents and decreased aggression and antipsychotic medication use. Here's a look at today's agenda for our webinar. Please remember to type any questions you have for our speaker today into the Q&A section of the webinar room. If you do want to engage in the chat box today, please remember to select everyone so we can all see your messages. Here's a look at today's webinar objectives. And it is my pleasure to now introduce Dave Keaton Jr., who is a management consultant and our featured speaker for today. And Dave, I'm going to stop sharing and bring up your slide deck, and then we can get started.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Really appreciate it. Well, first off, I want to say hello to everybody from, it looks like, all over the place. I was going to say good morning, good afternoon, and even probably good evening to some folks. Looking at where everybody's joining from, pretty impressive. So thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to having a good conversation with you today. So again, my name is David Keaton, and I've been working in the senior living industry now for approximately 30 years. I actually got started as a recreation therapist, working with the state of California many years back, and had a really unique opportunity to work with special needs individuals that also were seniors. And so I had a dual opportunity to learn a lot of special skills and, figure out how to best provide programming and activities for a wide range of individuals. Today's presentation is going to focus, as the title said, on empathy and leadership and what is the difference between sympathy and empathy. A lot of people think they're the same things, and are some definite differences to them, and we want to make sure that everybody understands how those work and how you can use empathetic leadership to better manage your organizations and work with your fellow employees, your residents, and your family members as well. So let's get going here. So let's see if we can. There we go. So webinar objectives, as Megan already mentioned, we want to talk about the differences between sympathy and empathy and how they impact employee and resident satisfaction. We're going to talk about utilizing empathetic management in difficult situations and how this can improve resident engagement. But I also want to talk about how you improve employee engagement and family engagement, because that's really the three legs to the stool, is employees, residents, and families. If all those pieces are working well together, then the overall environment and community is going to be a much better situation. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the pitfalls of empathetic management. Just like anything, there's always some pros and cons to any technique that you use. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So I always like this first slide here, just kind of a bit of a cartoon, but empathy, that's nothing but a code word for compassion. And then the other gentleman sitting there is going socialism. But, a lot of people look at empathy and sympathy and they think they're, just terms, and, people, like, oh boy, we're social workers, and no criticism to social workers, but, we're just going to, be, friendly and nice and, compassionate, and, we're not going to get the job done. But that's not what it means in any way. So empathy and sympathy absolutely is a management technique that needs to be used in our communities. And again, with the employees, with those residents, and with those families. So let's jump into really what are the differences. First off is sympathy. If you look on the left side, it says sympathy, and the person in the chair is sitting there and they're saying, "I'm sorry, that must hurt." And the key word there is that must hurt. Sympathy, and we'll describe it a little bit more as we go, but sympathy is feeling sorry for a situation that has occurred with somebody, and they've come to you and said, "Hey, I've got this issue, or this situation has occurred," and you sit down with them and you say, "I'm really sorry to hear that." Whereas empathy is when you can actually share the emotion with that other individual, where you share an experience that you have had that is similar to what they are experiencing right now. And it allows you to bond much closer with them because you understand their feelings and what they are going through at the time. So again, sympathy is feeling sorry for somebody, but you haven't necessarily experienced it. Whereas empathy is, hey, I've been there. This happened to me before. I'm dealt with these emotions that you're dealing with. And now hopefully you and I can sit down and have a conversation about it. A little bit more in depth. As you see here, sympathy involves feelings of compassion, sorrow, sadness, or pity for another person or other people who are facing, difficult circumstances. It's an emotion, experience, and reaction to something that happens to other people. When you feel sorry for someone, you have sympathy for that person. Okay. So again, they've come to you, they're experiencing a situation, and you feel sorrow for them and compassion, and, you're sitting down with them. And this is why sympathy and empathy get confused, because it seems like, hey, I'm relating to this person, I'm trying to talk with them, I'm trying to make them feel better and get through whatever is going on. But again, in sympathy, you haven't experienced what they're dealing with, and I want to talk about that at the end a little bit as well, as one of the pitfalls. Whereas empathy, it's stronger than sympathy. It goes beyond feeling compassion for the loss. It's the ability to put yourself in the place of another and understand what they're feeling. You're able to identify with them and, again, share experiences that you have had personally with them and help them get through what's going on. So rather than just feeling bad for another person, showing empathy involves actually sharing their feelings. So that is the primary difference between sympathy and empathy. They're both used on a regular basis. We can't be empathetic in every single situation because we haven't experienced everything that somebody else is going through. But in some cases you can, and if you have experienced it, then use an empathetic approach versus a sympathetic approach. Again, it's stronger, and I think has probably better value and more impact when you can use empathy versus sympathy. So I like this quote. This is from Howard Schultz, who's the founder of Starbucks. And, it's just, I wanted to take it a little bit out of our industry, but, it applies to any industry. And he says, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers. That is my new battle cry. Live and breathe Starbucks the way our customers do. And what he's saying here is, in order for Starbucks to do a good job, and you can certainly apply this to what we're doing as well, in order for us to do a good job at what we're doing, we need to understand our customers. And in this case, our customers may be our residents, our customers are our family members. And quite honestly, if you are a manager or an executive, your customer is your staff, your employees. And so in order to do a good job for them and to make sure that you're meeting their needs, you need to make sure that you understand what they're looking for and live and breathe the way your customers do. So, and Starbucks, of course, very successful. And I think that battle cry has worked well for him. And so we need to do the same thing in our industry. Empathetic leadership is the ability to lead while understanding the context, experiences, and needs of others and being aware of their thoughts and feelings. And here, I think, really a key word here is experience. If somebody's experiencing, say, a death, if a family is dealing with the death of a resident and they've come to you and they're working with you, if you've never experienced that, you can be sympathetic, but you can't be empathetic. If you have experienced that and you've dealt with your own family members that may have, passed, then you can sit down with them and say, boy, this is how I felt. It's really tough. You're going to go through all these different experiences and these different feelings and emotions. And here's how I dealt with it. And maybe I can help you move through that. So again, understanding the experiences and sharing those experiences is really the key piece to empathetic leadership. This one I really like, and it says, I've been in your shoes, and you understand what someone has experienced because you've experienced something similar. In our industry, and many of you have probably gone through this if you're, skilled nursing administrators or healthcare administrators, but you probably went through an AIT, and the administrator and training programs are very specifically designed to allow you to go through all the different departments and do the job, so that when you are the administrator, when you are the healthcare director, you can have empathetic conversations with your team members when they come to you and say, hey, I have a problem, or I don't know how to do this, or this is something that is just too hard and I need your assistance. You can say, look, I worked in the laundry. I know how it works. I've been a caregiver. I know how it works. I have passed medications. I have been in the maintenance department. Any of these different areas, the whole point of the AIT is to allow you to have been in the shoes of your team members. And so when somebody does come to you, you can truly be empathetic versus sympathetic. If you can just say, oh yeah, I know what it's, I feel bad because, I can't, you're, as a CNA, you've been, working so hard, and, if you've never done that job, you can't relate to them very well. So, I think it's really key to be in their shoes, try all the different things, and understand people as much as you can. So empathetic management, it encourages leaders to understand the root cause behind poor performance. Now, I'm talking a little bit more about staff here at the moment, but we can talk, and relate this to residents and family members as well. But being empathetic allows leaders to help struggling employees improve and excel. Empathy allows leaders to build and develop relationships with those they lead. And I think that is absolutely key. And I've found that so important in my leadership experience, is really getting to understand my employees and, share stories that, again, I've been doing this for about 30 years. So I've got a laundry list of different things that I've dealt with. I started as a caregiver as well. And so there's a little bit of a badge of honor, I guess, that goes along with that, in that, hey, okay, I get it, guys. This is a hard job. You work all night, you work all day, you're doing some things that aren't particularly fun to do. But guess what? Let's figure out how to make it the best situation possible. And I do that by developing relationships and using empathetic management. Again, it allows you to bond closer with those employees. And then ultimately, if you go back to the title of this, is how do we improve resident experiences? If your employees are feeling appreciated and your employees are supported and they like where they're at and what they're doing, they're going to provide service that is so much better to those residents. So there really is a trickle down effect to this, from being the leader to your employees, and then that trickles down to your residents, and they're getting the experience that we promised them. Again, it all starts by being empathetic, and that flows all the way through from top to bottom. And again, also to families, and I'll talk about, again, families in a little bit, because that's such a big aspect of our business. Our customer is not just a resident, it is the family member. In fact, sometimes I feel like the family members take more time and more attention and require more empathy, even than the residents, because they're, really sometimes in a difficult place in life and need that support from us as caregivers and as community leaders. So how do you get the leaders and employees to be more empathetic? So first bullet point there, it says, if you're a manager, the next time an employee comes to you with a problem or complaint, resist the, oh gosh, here we go, not again, what now attitude. And you see that we've probably all experienced that ourselves with maybe bosses, that we've worked with in the past, or maybe you're the manager and, here comes so-and-so again. And they're like, and you roll your eyes and, you say behind your breath, oh boy, here they come, not again, what now attitude. And guess what? Employees can see that. They see that, they can sense that, they know when you don't care, and they know when you're just trying to brush them off. So best thing here is try to remember, you once had a similar problem, if not someone you respect did. So think about that. And this is what it's saying with empathetic management is, if this employee is coming to you with a problem, figure out, okay, did I experience that somewhere in my past? How did I deal with it? How did I deal with that boss that said, oh, good gracious, here they come again? And then figure out that story, and then sit down with that employee and say, look, okay, I get it. This is what happened to you in the past, or this is what's happening to you now. This is what happened to me in the past. And I think we can figure out how to make this situation better. And again, that's that empathetic management. If a specific task, and this is the second bullet point, if a specific task or process is causing problems, try to work alongside that disgruntled team member. Try to understand them. What is their point of view? So often we have our own point of view and we just jump to conclusions and we're ready to just say, look, this is my way or the highway type of thing. And we need to understand that, in order to get good support from our employees and to support them back, we need to use empathetic management and say, look, okay, let's look at this situation. I've dealt with it in the past. How are we going to deal with it now? And then finally, the third one is, if you're an employee who feels your manager is being extremely unreasonable, and I can't imagine that ever happening, but it probably does, try to understand why. Maybe the manager is dealing with extreme pressure on his or her own, or maybe there's a problem at home, or maybe, you get the whole idea of what I'm talking about here is, we're all human beings, whether you're the president of the company, whether you are the brand new employee that just started, we all have things that are going on in life. And so, sometimes we support going back up the chain as well. This is not a one-way street of top-down empathetic management. Empathetic management and conversations can happen from any level, up and or down. So I think it's important for everybody on the call to understand that, regardless of the position that you're in, you can use these techniques to gain better relationships with your peers. I realized I have a duplicate slide there. Okay. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So I thought that was just a nice little quote from Theodore Roosevelt. But, basically the whole point is if you show that you don't care, nobody's going to care to do the job. They're not going to provide good resident care. They're not going to work well with the families. They're not going to represent your organization well. So as a manager in particular, I think it is absolutely your duty to make sure that your employees know how much you care, and they will then in turn pass that along. So nice little, diagram here. There's 3 types of empathy. I bet everybody didn't realize that you could break this down so much detail, but there is. So the first part is cognitive. So you look at the center circle, it says empathy, but there's cognitive empathy, and it's understanding how a person thinks and feels on a conceptual level. And then you have the compassionate side, and that's down below the arrows, and it says beyond simply understanding, this kind of empathy means actually sharing another's experience. And I'll bring up an example here that we probably all went through over the last few years, but that's compassionate. And then finally, emotional, connecting with the feelings of another on an emotional level. So you probably have all 3 moving around at any given time. And certainly you have the cognitive side, and that's sort of the more literal piece of it. But the compassionate and the emotional side, I think, is where you get the most bang for the buck. Again, you can't relate emotionally with every single person in every single situation. You just, everybody has their own lives, everybody's got their own path that they're following, and everybody has their own experiences. And sometimes you have things that you are dealing with and that are similar, and sometimes you don't. So that's why you move back and forth between sympathy and empathy. And if you can't be empathetic, at least be sympathetic. I always got to remind everybody that, you've got to use both techniques and use the appropriate one at the appropriate time. So a few things here, define your culture. Get to know those around you by promoting open communication. Think about this, how does your organization interact? How do you interact with your residents? How do you interact with your families? Do you have resident councils? Do you have family council meetings? Do you have family support groups? These are all ways to promote open communication. And, I think we've all been doing this long enough to know that the more you communicate openly, the better the results are going to be, and the better the relationships will be. And ultimately, the better the product or the service that we deliver will be. So promote open communication at all times. That's absolutely key. Being aware of everyone's strengths and weaknesses. Okay. We've all heard of, the analogy of, right seat on the bus, and, are you in the right place on the bus? And I think it's really important to make sure that you understand where strengths and weaknesses every employee that you have. And, if you've got somebody that's fantastic communicator and you watch them, maybe they work in the kitchen and they come out into the dining room and you just see the dining room residents, they light up, and you see this wonderful communication going back and forth. And you might say, you know what? This person's a good cook, but maybe we ought to bring them to more of a front of the house role because they interact so well with those residents. On the flip side, we've had individuals that, are wonderful caregivers in independent living or a standard assisted living, and they move over to memory care, and they just don't do quite as well. Memory care is a unique situation. If you've worked in that area, you know that it takes a special individual and a lot of patience and a lot of special skills. And if you don't have that, it doesn't mean that you're not a good employee. You just may not be in the right place. So make sure that you evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of everybody. Create a comfortable environment. I can't reinforce this enough, and that's something that I've always really strived for. Is one, I work all the time. I'm there all the time. If the environment is uncomfortable, I don't want to be there. And if I don't want to be there, I'm not going to deliver the service that is what we are expected to provide. So, make the environment comfortable, and that goes back to communication, but it also means just have some fun with your team members, have some fun with your residents, have fun with your family members, different things such as having family picnics and family get-togethers. And, it may not be a support group, but maybe you just have a wine and cheese night where all the families are invited and they get together with their resident and family members and you as the staff, and you create this comfortable environment that really makes the overall environment much more pleasant. And then finally, inspiring a creative and open atmosphere. This takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to do this because, being open, being creative, allowing people to submit ideas to you, that sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes we like to come in and we like to do it our way, and this is how it's going to happen. It's faster to do it the way I want to do it. I think I can do it better. And we don't open the environment or the atmosphere to others to contribute. So make sure that you spend some time and allow people to be creative and open. Diversify thinking is the next piece. Opening the floor to open discussion. And we've all probably been in resident council meetings or family meetings where you open the floor to the audience and you get slammed with all kinds of questions and complaints and concerns. And so opening the floor to open discussion, sometimes people are very afraid of that. People don't like to do that because they don't want to be challenged and, don't like to be yelled at. But if you don't open the floor to discussion and allow people to talk, then you're never going to hear what needs to be heard by you. You're not going to hear what's happening in the community. Sometimes if you are the administrator or the director or executive director and you're sitting away from the day-to-day discussion, then you don't hear what's happening with the residents. You don't hear what's happening with the families. You don't hear what's happening with the staff. One of the best things you can do is go in and go hang out if they're willing to let you hang out in the employee break room and just have lunch with them and listen to the employees and have some open discussion. Don't criticize, don't direct, just listen and allow them to feel like they can discuss things with you. And you'll get a lot of great information that way. Building a relaxed atmosphere, again, that kind of goes back to just a comfortable environment, but how do you make an atmosphere relaxed? And that is so key, especially with our assisted living and memory care areas. The whole point of that is to reduce anxiety for those individuals living there. And so creating that relaxed atmosphere starts at the top. If the executive director or administrator creates that relaxed atmosphere with the employees and they like coming to work and they are comfortable with each other, then guess what? That's going to, again, translate to better care for those residents and making sure that, the environment is relaxed and reducing anxiety, which is one of our missions within this field, is to help those residents that are living with us be more relaxed, enjoying their lifestyle, and be in a place that they're comfortable with. Make sure that allowing unproven and creative solutions are heard. Sometimes, one of the worst things I always hear is back in the day, you never want to just listen to only things that have been done over and over again. You want to allow some unproven and creative solutions to be presented. It doesn't mean they're all going to work, but if you don't allow creativity, we're never going to grow. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if you look at our industry over the last, 20, 30 years, again, when I started, it was pretty scary. Some of the communities did not look too good. And there's stereotypes, of communities that still exist, or, a place where you really wouldn't want to put your family member. And so by allowing unproven and creative solutions to have occurred over the last bunch of years, I think we've improved our business significantly. So make sure that you're not so rigid that you don't allow for creativity. And finally, encouraging undivided attention to everyone. Again, that makes sense. You don't, just talk to your buddies and your clique. Make sure that you're talking to everyone, as a manager, and you're walking through the organization, walking through that community, and you see that staff person that's always kind of by themselves. They just don't talk much, and they're kind of shy. You need to make the effort to go over there and talk to them as well. Everybody on your team is important, no matter what position they're in, no matter how long that they've been there. And so as a manager and as a leader, and when I really want to stress leader, because leaders make that organization go forward, but provide that attention to everybody, not just a select few. And finally, improve loyalty, engaging minds and hearts by showing that you care. Okay. And people know we're very good. Humans are very good at sensing other people's emotions. And sometimes we think, we're hiding things, but we're not. Most people can read right through us and see whether we care or not. So, think about your demeanor as you are walking through the community. And this applies to the residents as well. Even residents that with, severe memory care can really see quickly whether you care or not. Just based on your body language, your tone of voice, a lot of different subtle aspects of who we are come out, as we're walking around a community. So, be careful with that. Make sure that you go look in a mirror from time to time and, what does your facial expression look like? What does your body language look like? If you're walking in there and you look mad, guess what? Even the residents, again, that have very little understanding of the environment can look at that and see if somebody's angry or mad. And if you look that way, then they're going to respond in turn, and their anxiety levels are going to go up. They may become fearful, and that's absolutely the wrong thing that we're trying to do. We're trying, again, to make them, provide them a space that they want to be in. Understanding everyone's motivations. If you go back to the team, why are they there? Some caregivers and some employees are there because they absolutely love doing this job. They're caregivers at heart. They want to do this, and that's their personal mission is, to work in senior living and provide great care to our residents. We have other employees, and we all know these folks that do a good job, but they're there because they need a paycheck. Okay. So I think it's important to understand what everybody's motivations are. And if you better understand those motivations, then you can tailor your leadership and your interactions better for that individual. This also applies to family members. Understanding the motivations of the family members. In some cases, families are like, I just want mom or dad or husband, wife to be in the most special place, and I want great, wonderful care for them. And, it's going to be a wonderful social environment, and you're going to take great care of them. And that's what they're looking for. In other cases, this may be a family member that's been fairly removed over the many years and said, I kind of got stuck with having to take care of mom or dad, and so I'm going to move them into this community. I just need you to do what you said you're going to do, and only call me in an emergency. But there's different motivations with different family members as well. So you need to better understand those families and where they're coming from. Building a foundation of trust is, this is absolutely key to the entire business. That's the whole thing of what we sell. If you look at, you talk to any of our sales and marketing folks, what are they doing? They're selling trust. Okay. I'm trusting you, community, to take good care of my family member. Okay. It's so key to make sure that that trust is there. And if we break that trust, then we've broken that relationship, and that person ends up moving out, and, we don't stay in business. So it's so key to have that trust factor. And then finally, emphasizing personal development. Everybody wants to be recognized. Everybody wants to feel like they've got a pathway forward. Okay. Yes, people do come to work and they want their paycheck. I do too. It's important. But I really appreciate when an organization supports me from a personal standpoint and helps me develop. And especially focus this on your young employees. You've got a lot of younger folks that are coming into your organization all the time. And they're, coming in and they don't really know where they're going with it. But they go, well, seems pretty cool. And, I like doing this, but where are they going to go? In order for us to keep good people in our industry, we need to make sure that we develop them throughout their careers and have a career ladder for them and, a path forward. Most people don't want to just start one job and just stay there forever doing the exact same thing. So develop your folks. So I like this one. This is, an old Monopoly card for you, for those of you old enough that still play Monopoly. I know younger folks may not play it anymore, but community chest was on the card. It says just benefit of the doubt, and simply put, empathy begins by giving others the benefit of the doubt, and saying, hey, you know what, let's sit down and talk about this. I may be able to relate to this better, but you got to give them some time to do that and discuss what is happening. Don't brush people off so quickly. So let's talk a little bit about difficult residents or family members. We've all experienced this, I know. Emotions often run high between residents, family members, and community employees, and causes this, as we know, include guilt. People feel guilty still. As nice as a community that you operate, and as nice as the place looks, and it's beautiful buildings and grounds, and the staff are super friendly, the food tastes great, the service is fantastic, family members still feel guilty about moving mom or dad or husband or wife out of their home and into one of our communities. So guilt is one of the primary emotions that we're dealing with on a regular basis. Lack of control is another one. Where a family member, if maybe they're the primary caregiver, the spouse has memory care issues, and they've been out of control for many, sometimes years, and finally they move somebody into the community. And so one, they already feel guilty, but now they also feel a lack of control. Now I can't control the environment anymore. I'm turning my loved one over to you as a community member, and now I don't have any control over things anymore. And so that can create a lot of emotions as well. Loss is another one. Dealing with loss, family members are dealing with loss, residents are dealing with loss. You think about it, somebody that's, living in our communities, and again, average ages in our communities are running, in the high 80s to 90s and above. They've got a lot of loss going on right now, and they're dealing with that on a regular basis. And so you need to be aware of some of those factors. And then finally, a feeling of disrespect and, self-esteem is another aspect of that, where, people don't treat me as an adult anymore. One of the biggest things that I learned early on working with special needs individuals is, making sure that we interact with people in an age appropriate way. One of the worst things I always saw was, when the communities would bring out toys for people that had dementia and special needs, and they'd be playing with, Fisher Price toys. And it was so demeaning and disrespectful. So these are all things that go into why emotions run high. And so you as a staff member, you as a community employee need to understand why residents may be feeling this way, why family members may be feeling a certain way. And quite honestly, also your peers. You never know what's going on in your employees, your fellow coworkers' lives. So again, to the card before that said that give them the benefit of the doubt before you just brush them off and say you stop being so grumpy and difficult to work with, or difficult to interact with. Sit down with them and say, okay, what's going on? What's happening? Go back to that open communication and see what is it that is of concern. And if you can break it down, and again, you may be able to use sympathy, but maybe you've also experienced guilt, lack of control, loss, or a feeling of disrespect. If you have, then tailor that to that interaction with them and do an empathetic approach. Sympathetic versus empathetic interventions depends on the employee and their personal experiences dealing with these emotions, or their own family members. Young staff may not have dealt with death a lot, whereas an older employee, I get to say I'm older now, and I've experienced it myself, where, my father was in memory care for a couple of years and then he passed. And so I have a very different understanding of where family members are coming from, where when I was younger and before those things occurred, yes, I was trained and I read all kinds of books and I went to all kinds of seminars like this, and people told me all kinds of great things, but I could be sympathetic only. I could only be sympathetic. Boy, that must be terrible for you. That must really feel bad. But I couldn't say, I understand where you're coming from. I always found it interesting, when my father, he lived actually in one of the communities that my company operated, and I used to come home at night, and sometimes I'd say, boy, I didn't like what I saw happening at the community, and boy, or if I had a complaint, and then I'd come home and I'd look in the mirror and I go, I wonder who am I supposed to yell at? And then, I'd look in that mirror and say, well, geez, Dave, that's you. Okay. And so it was really quite a unique experience to have a family member in a community that I operated. So it gave me that empathetic approach. So now when I talk to families, and I talk to them all the time, I bring this story up all the time, and it helps break the ice. It helps me bridge the gap so much better than when I said before, when I was younger, well, I bet that's really hard. And then they go, you don't know what I feel like, and so this kind of, again, helps you bridge that gap. Assign appropriate staff members to the resident or family member experiencing the difficult situation. You as the manager, you as the leader need to think about this and say, okay, who's going to have the best ability to be empathetic with this family member or this resident? Okay. Don't send in the brand new, kid right out of high school and say, okay, you go deal with, this family member that's having a tough time today. That's not going to work. Okay. You need to sit there and say, hey, who on my team will work better? So I see somebody said disagree that toys are demeaning. So maybe we can answer that question a little bit later. So we'll talk about that as we go through. Let's talk a little bit about a real life story that we've all been dealing with, and how empathy really, came to be for me, and why I actually put this presentation together. Obviously we all in this industry and everybody in the world was dealing with COVID and still is, and so our company decided to make the vaccine mandatory for all employees. And so if you were going to remain employed with our company, you had to be vaccinated or have one of the exclusions, the approved exclusions that, either for religious or medical. And certainly we honored those. But, in most cases, we said, look, if you don't have one of these reasons, then you do need to become vaccinated. And of course, this was really tough for everybody. And it was tough for me. It's tough for all of us. And this is where I think we can all be empathetic, because as a human population, we all experienced it. But, the vaccine started coming out and I started thinking, should I get the vaccine? Is it safe? Will I have side effects, both short-term and long-term? And will it work, and for how long? And so I know everybody's had those same questions. I still have those questions because I don't know the long-term yet. I'm still waiting to see if something weird happens, over the next years. But, at this point, I decided I was going to go with the vaccine, and, that was our company policy. So we decided to put that in place. And where I was able to be empathetic was I was the first one in the company to get the vaccine. And this was a very, very key aspect of the whole process, and how we were going to make this happen was myself and my senior team. We were the very first ones to get the vaccine. I was number one, and we videoed this and showed all of our team members that we all received the vaccine. Where this really came into being important was we had, of course, and I'm sure your organizations did as well, numerous discussions with our management teams and our frontline workers regarding the vaccine. We had meeting after meeting after meeting at every single one of our locations, and we met with the day shifts, the night shifts, the afternoon shifts, making sure that we sat down with everybody and said, guys, here's the policy that we're putting in place, and we need you to get this vaccine. And of course, I'm moving through a couple slides here, but as we were having the meetings, these are the questions that came up. If you look at this, it says, and these are coming from the staff back to me when I'm standing in front of them. You are taking my livelihood away from me. How will I support my family? You cannot impose such restrictions. The vaccine will potentially harm me, and it will be your fault. And believe me, those were tough meetings. They're some of the toughest meetings I ever had, standing in front of these folks, and people were yelling and screaming at me. And sometimes I had 20 or 30 people in a room screaming and yelling all at one time. But the number one way I was able to get this message across and hopefully get people to join us and stay employed with us was I took an empathetic approach. And I would put the video up on the screen and I'd say, guys, I was the first one. I have all the exact same concerns that you do. But, in order for me to protect these residents and protect ourselves, I felt it was something that was important. And so I took the vaccine first. What it allowed me to do is be empathetic versus sympathetic. And I hope everybody understands the difference there. If I did not take that vaccine and I said, okay, you all will do it, they all would have bounced me right out of the room, and I would have had nobody follow me at that point, because sympathy would not work in that case. I had to use an empathetic approach and say, look, I understand all of your concerns, and I did it first. And being that I did it, I'm asking that you do it as well. And so we had a very good response. We did have about a 5% turnover rate overall company-wide, but that's pretty similar to what we've heard with other companies as well. But ultimately, we think it had a positive effect. Some of the things that we looked at, we approached it, with facts, data, real world examples, expert testimony, and again, an empathetic approach. And all those things, I think, allowed us to move forward and, get a pretty good response rate. Basically, and where we're at now, among employees, we have a 95% vaccination rate among employees. The remaining 5% have a medical or religious exemption. Significant reduction in resident employee cases. And we all saw that. You can look at the data, and we all watched when, in fact, I'll bump over to that. I think that's this one. You can see just over time where, the number of cases really ramped up. The vaccine became available, and it significantly decreased literally the next month. And we had several months of almost 0 cases. And then the next variant came out, and it started to go up a little bit again. And so you're going to see those patterns on and off again. But again, I think the message here was that I had to use an empathetic approach to my management in a very, very difficult situation. And if I had not been able to share the story with them and share the experiences with them, I would have not had the response rate that we had. So again, empathy works when you can use it, but use sympathy if you can't. So a couple last things here, what to worry about. Protecting residents and staff from the highly contagious, sometimes fatal COVID virus is no longer the top concern. And, everybody has different cases that are going on and off, so I'm not saying that it's gone, but other things that we absolutely need to consider now are anxiety, depression, loneliness, burnout, and stress. These are things actually that were really key during the lockdown phase of COVID. And this is something that I really got up on a soapbox about, was because I was really concerned that the governments and the state regulators and so forth took such and again, nobody knew what was going on. So I don't want to blame folks, but I think they just took such a hard-handed approach or heavy-handed approach to management of COVID that when these folks were literally locked down in their communities, the anxiety levels went through the roof. The depression levels went through the roof. They were lonely. They couldn't see their family members. Okay. Staff were burning out. The stress was just going like crazy. And we all experience this. We all know what I'm talking about here. And, I think that a lot of cases we may have done some more harm to individuals by having such a severe lockdown. Again, everybody was doing the best they could and trying to figure out how to deal with it. But it's something that if things happen again and there's a spike again or something else comes out, we need to make sure that we pay attention to these other issues such as anxiety, depression, loneliness, burnout, and stress. Again, loneliness is such a big one, and we go, well, yeah, okay, well, they were locked down, but for me, not seeing family members, for a few months, in some cases longer than that, I could probably get past that. But when you're 95 years old and you are not allowed to see your family members anymore, time is not on your side there. So we really, I think, did some disservices in our severe approach to managing COVID. So hopefully we can learn some lessons from it and move forward. It was super difficult, but again, we all dealt with it. So you can use an empathetic approach with your own team and your own residents if you're going forward. So let me talk a little bit about a little pitfall. And this is a picture of the captain going down with the ship. And this is a pitfalls of using maybe a little too much empathy in your approach to things. I'm still dealing kind of with COVID, but it says paralyzed by empathy. And the first bullet point there is to be clear, empathy in and of itself is never bad. Okay. And I think we can all agree with that. To put yourself in another's shoes can only help the world. In fact, the world could use more of it. When it comes to leadership and running an organization, however, empathy can get in the way. Okay. And this is a real life example, but one community that we operated, the community executive director during COVID, was empathetic to the point of increasing fear among residents and staff and creating a hysteria that encouraged staff to quit and residents to find an alternative place to live. So, basically the executive director related so closely with the residents and staff that he ultimately forgot he was the captain of the ship. And the concept here is that, remember, when you're the senior leader of an organization, or if you're a leader of any organization, one thing that you have to do is make sure that you allow people to feel safe and that you're doing the best that you can to keep them moving forward. And the case with the captain going down with the ship, the captain knows that ship's going down. That captain knows that they're not going to survive, but they can't show that to the other team members and to the residents. And that's exactly what happened in this particular case. Is, a wonderful executive director, but became so empathetic and so shared the fear of the disease to such a level with everybody that everybody got freaked out. Everybody got tremendously scared, and we just had all kinds of exit, both staff and residents, from the community. So you do need to be careful with that. Again, the leader needs to be the captain and show some confidence in the situation and lead through the situation, as well as being empathetic. There's a balance there that has to happen. And finally, a caution. Don't get caught trying to be empathetic when you can only be sympathetic. Okay. I think I've had this happen to me, and I'm sure others have probably had that happen as well. Understanding the difference will help you avoid an uncomfortable conversation. So choose your words carefully based on the situation. So choice A, when you're talking to somebody, and make sure you evaluate the situation carefully, is choice A is sympathetic. Although I have not experienced your situation, I'm doing my best to understand and can only imagine how you must feel. This is a sympathetic approach. Okay. Choice B is, I'm so sorry you feel this way. I too have experienced this situation and understand how you feel. Now, the caution here is if you cannot truly be empathetic and you try to say, I understand exactly how you feel, they're going to shoot right back at you and get angry. Okay. And I've had this happen to me where I thought I was trying to be sympathetic, maybe empathetic. And the person said, you have no idea what I'm going through. And you have no idea what my feelings are like right now. So who are you to tell me how I should or should not feel? So this is the caution here, is judge the situation, understand what is the basis behind the person's emotions and feelings, and then choose either to be sympathetic or to be empathetic. Again, both can work, but you need to understand the situation carefully. Okay, I think that's the end of my slides. So Megan, I know I've seen some questions pop up or some comments, and if we want to try and go through some of those.
Yes, that sounds wonderful. Dave, thank you so much. I know there's some great discussions happening right now, and I just like to start with a question for you from me, which is, if you had to give some concrete tips for people going back to their communities in the weeks and months ahead about how they can begin to practice empathetic management, what would some of those tips be?
Well, I think, the first thing to do is just go back and, understand and have that open communication. That's really the key piece, is talking to your employees. A lot of times we make assumptions, and we all know what assume spells out to. But if you make an assumption about employees or residents and or families, a lot of times you're going to approach things from the wrong way. So I think the best thing that you can do is sit down and actually have conversations. I can go into all kinds of leadership techniques and everything, but one of the most common techniques that you always hear about leaders is management by walking around. And the whole point of that is, if you walk around and you look to see what's going on in the environment and you see what the work environment is like, how often do the executive directors and leaders on this call, hang out with their night shifts, and I'm always surprised, when I train, and I even talk to some of my own teams. I said, what's the last time, ED, you were in the building at night? And they're like, ooh, gosh, I don't know. Well, how can you be empathetic with those individuals if you have no idea what their work life is like? What is it like to work a night shift? Are the residents up and about? Is it so boring that it's easy to fall asleep? If you never communicate with folks and you never talk with them, you can't be empathetic because you don't know where they're coming from. So I think that's the whole crux to being empathetic. And then once you hear the information back, take the time. Don't you got to be careful. Words are important. And if you just spout off some things and say, hey, this is how I felt and so forth, you need to evaluate each individual. You need to evaluate your story. Is your story make sense? Does it relate to what they're going through at the same time? Again, back to walk in your shoes. I may not be able to relate to somebody because I've never done their job. So be careful trying to be empathetic when only you should be sympathetic.
Thanks so much, Dave. And I do wonder, should we take a moment to talk about the toys are demeaning comment from Amy and what she talked about here. She said they can be lifesavers for those with limited dexterity, poor vision, simple design, and familiar for past memories. What are some of your thoughts you have around toys? Let's expand upon that.
Well, sure. I guess, and you do need to be careful with that. But I think if you take the time to look at what you're providing to the individuals, you can have things that can be manipulated. You can have things that are colorful. You can have things that, work in a very similar way as a toy does. And we've seen plenty of these kind of supplies and things that are available, certainly in the memory care arena, that, are doing in function the same exact thing as a Fisher Price toy. But when I see somebody, and where I come from this is, if I walked in and I saw my dad playing with Fisher Price toys, knowing that he was a mechanical engineer with a master's degree and led, a very, successful life. If I walked in and I saw my dad playing with the little Fisher Price donuts stacking, I'd have a real problem with that. It's demeaning to my father and it's not respectful. So, but if I walk in and he's manipulating some tools and some parts to, you can take plumbing parts are a great thing. You can go to any Home Depot and buy all kinds of plumbing parts that screw together and accomplish the same concept that the toys would, but it looks a lot better to the individual. And we, a lot of times we don't realize where their mind is, even though they may not be able to communicate with us. They still have a lot of memories themselves, and they may, to themselves say, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I playing with these little toys? I'm above this, I'm an adult. And so I think it's just so important to look at that. Now, you also have to be careful. I remember when I worked with the state of California and they went through this age appropriate and they swept everything out and they took, they took all their, the stuffed animals even that, people had been attached to for years and caused a lot of pain that way. So I'm not saying to just sweep it all out and, you have nothing, but just when you can, try to look at the function that you're trying to accomplish and then use something that's age appropriate versus, going with the simple toys.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dave. And I'm going to get ready to put up some last slides here, but I do have another question in the time we have left, which is, you spoke a lot about the feelings of depression and loneliness and isolation that many of us are experiencing, especially during the time of COVID. I wonder if you think that that has maybe hurt people's ability to be able to tap into their empathy. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, hopefully it will allow us to, if we understand the concept of empathy and practice empathy, that if we all shared it, that's where we're able to be empathetic. And so I don't know if it will block it so much in that I think it gives us the experience that we need to be able to talk to everybody else. And for the first time ever, we can all share an experience across the world. And every employee that I work with, every family member that I come in contact with, every resident, I can now be empathetic with them. So no, I don't think it blocks it in any way. I think it gives us the experience, the shared experience, and as long as we're cognizant of being empathetic and sharing it and using it in the right way, I think it'd be very valuable.
Dave, thank you so much for your time today. And I know many of us here actually wanted to keep the conversation going. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and put up your contact information, if that's all right, so that people can get in touch with you directly if they have any questions. I also went ahead and shared your slide deck in the webinar room chat box if folks want to download that to take some notes and share with their respective teams as well. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today, Dave. Really appreciate it. And I'm just going to have a couple more announcements here before I drop the continuing education link in the chat box there. But we just want to encourage everyone to join us for our next live webinar event, which will be on Tuesday, October 25th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The Perfect Day in Dementia Care with our own Dr. Jennifer Stelter and Jessica Ryan from NeuroEssence at the Dementia Connection Institute. We will offer free continuing education for that event. And finally, just a reminder, if you haven't already registered for our International Montessori for Dementia Conference, that's a virtual conference happening on Tuesday, December 6th. We will be offering up to 3 free continuing educations for that. The full agenda will be launched soon, but you can go ahead and still register and save your place for that free event today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, get that continuing education link in the chat box now, and I will stop the recording. Dave, thank you again, and we will see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.